Hey guys, tonight we're stepping through a creaking wooden door and into a place that smells like barley, sweat, and mischief. The medieval alehouse. You can almost feel the smoky haze clinging to your hair already, can't you? The kind of warmth that sticks to your clothes and makes the morning priest sigh at you the next day. You're about to spend a long night in here, so brace yourself. The laughter is loud, the air thick, and honestly, you probably won't survive the drinking pace these villagers manage. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Tell me where you're listening from and what time it is for you right now. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You push against the alehouse door, and it fights back like it's been swollen by 100 rainy nights. When it finally swings open, a wall of sound, laughter, clinking mugs, and the occasional hiccup smacks into you. The place is alive. Straw crunches under your boots, scattered to soak up the spills that never end. Smoke curls from a fire that's been burning since morning, carrying the smell of oak and half-scorched stew. Inside, faces glow red under the flicker of tallow candles. The walls are timber and wattle, patched with old plaster that's seen better days. You notice a carving near the door, a crude etching of a pig with wings, probably someone's drunken idea of divine art. The alehouse isn't big. Maybe a single room, low ceiling, beams blackened from years of smoke. The owner, called the alewife tonight, stands behind a roughly hewn table, doubling as a bar. Her sleeves are rolled up, her hair tied with a strip of cloth, and she's shouting at a boy to fetch another bucket from the cask. Everyone here knows each other, or pretends to. That's part of the charm. You feel a few eyes glance at you, weighing whether you're a harmless traveler or someone who might start a fight before the night's done. There's a rhythm to this place, an unspoken social script. People don't just drink, they perform. The carpenter boasts of how many planks he laid that week. The shepherd mutters about wolves, real or imagined. Two laborers slap each other's backs and argue over who saw the prettiest maid at market. It's like medieval reality TV, but the confessional happens out loud with a mug of ale as your microphone. You find a corner near the hearth where the warmth feels honest, and watch. The alewife pours another cup, golden and cloudy, with a thin head of foam. Back then, ale wasn't the crisp filtered drink you might imagine. It was thick, alive, sometimes still bubbling with fermentation, and yet it was safer to drink than water. You remind yourself that medieval wells often doubled as neighborhood garbage dumps, and suddenly this murky drink seems divine. Historians still argue whether the alehouse was primarily a working-class escape or a disguised community center. Truth is, it was both. People came for drink, sure, but also for news, gossip, and matchmaking. The local church might frown, but even friars stopped in for refreshment when the road grew long. A man nearby, his tunic patched more times than you can count, calls out a toast, "To the harvest," he says, and the room hums in agreement. They lift their mugs, and the sound of clay against wood rings like a rustic bell. One mainstream fact floats through your mind by the 14th century. Alehouses were legally distinct from taverns and inns. Taverns sold imported wine and catered to wealthier customers. Inns offered lodging. Alehouses? They were the people's spaces, cheap, local, and usually run out of someone's home. That explains why this one feels so lived in. As you take your first sip, yes, go ahead. Just imagine it, the ale hits earthy and yeasty, with a bite that burns pleasantly. Someone nearby insists that spiced ale keeps the devil from the gut. That's your quirky tidbit for the night. In some places, people genuinely believed herbs like wormwood or groot gave the brew moral protection. You can't help but grin. The Middle Ages had no shortage of superstitions. If it tasted strange, it must ward off something worse. The alewife's cat slinks between legs, tail raised, its fur catching the firelight like spun copper. She swats it away, muttering something about bad luck when cats sit near the hearth. A man beside you winks, whispering, only if it listens too close. You both chuckle. It's the kind of place where humor grows easier after each swallow. As the room fills, so does the noise. Someone slaps a hand drum, and a crude melody takes shape. The smell of roasted onions and smoke drifts your way, and suddenly your stomach growls. You glance toward a pot simmering over the fire. Barley leaks. Maybe a bit of salted pork, if fortune smiles. Meals here aren't ordered. They just happen, shared among whoever paid earlier. A pair of farmers argue about the price of wool, their voices like gravel. One insists the market cheated him. The other insists the sheep were to blame. When their laughter follows, you realize even anger is performative here, a way to show off toughness before returning to friendship. In the far corner, a young woman hums softly, half hidden by shadows. The song's melody is simple, sad, something about a sailor who never came back. The room hushes, just for a heartbeat. You can feel the emotion tighten, then loosen again as someone jokes, he probably found better ale abroad. The laughter returns, breaking the spell. You notice something fascinating. Everyone's eyes occasionally flick toward the door as if expecting someone. Maybe the reeve, maybe the churchwarden, maybe trouble. Alehouses lived under suspicion. Too much laughter, too many secrets, and suddenly rumors of sinful gatherings spread. Yet they endured, because no other place let ordinary people speak freely. There's a sense of rebellion here, small but steady. The world outside runs on feudal duties and church bells, but in this smoky room, hierarchy dissolves. The Lord's reeve might drink beside a laborer, and for one night they're equals, at least until someone mentions taxes. A group near you begins a drinking game. Guess the ale's age by taste. One claims it's 2 days old. Another swears it's yesterday's batch gone sour. The alewife intervenes, hands on hips, and declares you'll drink it or you'll leave it. No sermons here. Everyone cheers. You lean back, mug in hand, the fire painting your face in amber light. This place breathes. It's alive in ways the cold manor halls never are. Every sound, a crack of laughter, a slap on the table, the rush of ale poured becomes part of the night's rhythm. Someone nudges you, half drunk, eager to talk. He tells you he's heard a rumor. The miller's wife has been selling watered ale on market day. You feign shock, because that's what you're supposed to do, though inside you wonder how often these stories shift and stretch like dough in a baker's hands. The alewife glances your way again, her expression hard to read, protective, amused, maybe both. She's seen this dance 1,000 times. You realize she's the real master of the room, not the loud man, not the fiddler who's just starting to tune his strings. Without her, the place would fall apart. A final laugh ripples through the crowd as someone makes a joke about monks brewing holy hangovers. It lands perfectly. The kind of humor that skates just short of blasphemy. That's the balance everyone learns here. How far to push before someone tattles to the parish priest. Outside, night deepens. The world narrows to this warm pocket of humanity. The smell of malt and candle wax. The rough hum of song beginning again. You realize that the alehouse isn't just about ale. It's about permission. Permission to speak, to forget, to belong. You take another sip, and the taste seems sweeter now. Someone calls for a story. Another fetches a small drum. The night's only begun, and already the walls feel like they're humming along. If you listen closely, you can almost hear centuries overlapping the laughter of men long gone, the clatter of mugs on tables that crumbled ages ago. It's all still here, echoing softly beneath the hiss of the fire. And in that moment, you understand, inside a medieval alehouse, time doesn't move forward. It loops, it dances, spills like ale across a rough wooden board. The air in the alehouse grows warmer as the night deepens. You begin to realize something important. This isn't just a place to drink. It's a place built on the sacred art of brewing. the slow magic of transforming grain and water into something that makes the world feel a little less heavy. Behind the table that passes for a counter, the alewife is in her element. You watch her scoop malt with the precision of a priest measuring relics. The smell of grain, sweet, nutty, faintly burnt, drifts around her like perfume. Every motion feels rehearsed. Stir, taste, pour, scold, repeat. You can tell she's done this since before you were born. You might imagine medieval brewing as a romantic affair, with copper kettles and secret herbs, but it's mostly muscle and sweat. Barley, oats, or wheat, whatever the local harvest allows, are mashed and boiled with water, then fermented with wild yeast. No fancy thermometers, no sterile labs, just instinct, timing, and the occasional prayer. Best brew comes when the weather's jealous. The alewife says to no one in particular. A good chill in the air keeps the spirits curious. You're not sure if she means ghosts or yeast, maybe both. Historians still argue whether alewives truly dominated the brewing trade or if later records exaggerated their role. What's certain is that many did run small household operations, sometimes so successful that they caught unwanted attention from guild brewers or church officials. You can imagine the tension, a woman selling more drink than a licensed man. Scandalous. And yet, here she stands, unbothered, her hands deep in malt, like it's a second skin. She waves to her helper, a lanky boy, barely 12, and tells him to fetch the cool tub. He groans, but does it anyway. You watch as they carry a heavy wooden bucket toward the open door, letting the cold night air help the ale settle. Steam rises like breath, disappearing into the dark. The alehouse crowd doesn't slow for this quiet ritual. Laughter still tumbles through the smoke. A carpenter hums while tapping his mug in rhythm with the clack of dice. Someone starts talking about Saint Arnold of Soissons, the patron saint of brewers, who supposedly saved a whole village from plague by convincing them to drink ale instead of water. Your alewife snorts at that. Saints saved anyone, she mutters. It's because they kept their cups full. That's your mainstream historical fact of the night. Ale was often safer than water. Not because it was mystical, but because boiling during brewing killed off the nastier microbes that turned wells into death traps. So yes, in a way, beer really did save lives. You lift your mug again, noticing how each swallow tastes slightly different. That's because consistency was almost impossible. One batch could be heaven, the next closer to vinegar. A clever brewer learned to disguise mistakes with spices: coriander, rosemary, even ginger if a traitor had passed through recently. You hear one drinker swear that he once tasted ale infused with powdered pearl to strengthen the loins. Another scoffs and says pearls are for chauffeurs, not farmers. There's your quirky tidbit. In some places, wealthier brewers added ground coral, pearl, or even gold leaf to special brews, claiming medicinal effects. Imagine catching gout and being told to drink jewelry. A traveler seated nearby notices your fascination and leans closer. "You're new here," he says, grinning. First thing to know, never insult the ale. Second thing, always praise the brewer, even if it tastes like horse bath water. Keeps you safe. You nod solemnly. Noted, he tells you that every village, kale tastes different because every village has its own yeast, invisible, local, almost like a fingerprint. It's the unseen signature of a place, alive in every mug. You look around, thinking how strange it is that even the microbes here are part of the community. The alewife returns, her sleeves wet, eyes sharp. "Too much chatter, not enough drinking," she says, mock scolding, and tops off your mug with a generous pour. The foam rises and spills over your fingers, sticky and sweet. "A good brew should greet you, not hide," she adds. A man at the next table grumbles that his wife nags him for drinking too much. Another responds, "She should be grateful you come home singing, not silent." The whole room bursts into laughter. It's the kind of line that probably gets repeated every night, reshaped to fit whoever's listening. You notice a barrel in the corner marked with a crude red cross. When you ask about it, the alewife says it's church ale, brewed for feast days. Sold to raise funds for the local parish. She smirks. They preach against us, then beg for our brew. God must have a fine sense of humor. And she's right. Alehouses and churches had a complicated relationship. The clergy condemned drunkenness, but relied on ale sales to finance repairs or festivals. It's a moral loop that could drive any theologian mad. A couple of men start arguing about who makes the best ale in the Shire. One insists it's his cousin's wife, who uses water from the Saint's spring. Another swears by a brewer who sings to her barrels during fermentation. Historians still argue whether such singing rituals were superstition or just practical timing cues. But to the medieval ear, a good chant could make yeast rise with divine enthusiasm. The fiddler from earlier tunes his instrument again, plucking each string until it hums like a sleepy bee. He begins to play, and suddenly the conversations soften, sinking to the rhythm. You realize the alehouse has its own pulse, one heartbeat shared among dozens of bodies, each warmed by the same drink. Then comes a moment of silence. The alewife tastes a new batch straight from the bucket, nods approvingly, and pours the first mug for herself. She raises it slightly toward the crowd. No speech, no ceremony, just a glance that says, "I made this. Drink well." Everyone follows. You take a sip, and it's smoother than before. The kind of ale that feels like bread in liquid form. Comforting, humble, quietly strong. You understand why people risked fines, gossip, even excommunication just to brew it. It's not just alcohol. Survival, communion, rebellion, all in one gulp. The talk turns to harvests, weather, and saints again. Someone swears that drinking ale brewed under a full moon makes you lucky at dice. Another counters that moonlight spoils yeast. Historians still argue about that, you mumble, earning a few confused stares and a chuckle. Then the alewife leans close and tells a story her mother once brewed a batch so strong it made a donkey fall asleep standing. "Best compliment I ever heard," she says proudly. Everyone roars with laughter. You can't tell if she's joking, but you don't care. It's the perfect image. A snoring donkey, a triumphant brewer, and a world tipsy enough to believe in magic. Outside, you hear rain start to fall, slow, steady, the kind that makes the roof creak like an old song. Inside, the light flickers golden against tankards and faces. The alewife's cat jumps onto the table again, and this time she lets it stay. Maybe even the superstitions take a break tonight. A sudden shout breaks through the calm. Two men are arguing near the doorway about who owes whom for last week's drink. The alewife doesn't flinch. She simply wipes her hands, walks over, and slams a wooden spoon on the table. "Settle it with mugs, not mouths," she says. The men blink, then grudgingly clink their cups together. Problem solved. You think she could run a kingdom with that spoon. Someone nearby starts humming an old tune about brewing. Something about barley sleeping and hops dancing. You can't catch all the words, but the chorus repeats. Good ale, good heart. Keep the night from falling apart. You smile, because that's exactly what's happening. The brew holds everything together. Strangers, jokes, grudges, love stories bound in one fragile foam. As the fiddler plays on, you notice your thoughts softening, your body leaning with the rhythm. The ale warms you from the inside, and the shadows on the walls seem to move in time with the song. You start to realize brewing isn't just a craft. It's a language, a way of saying, "I made this with my hands, and it might not be perfect, but it will keep you alive tonight." The alewife glances toward you one last time, her face half lit by the hearth. "Drink up, traveler," she says softly. "Tomorrow we brew again." You lift your mug in silent reply. The world outside is still dark and wet, but here inside it feels like dawn already broke, glowing amber in every cup. The fiddler adjusts his bowstring with the care of a man tuning his own heartbeat. The sound that follows is thin at first, a hesitant squeal that makes a few heads turn. Then it blooms into a melody that rolls across the room like warm air from the hearth. You feel it wrap around you, tugging you closer to the crowd until even your foot starts tapping without permission. Music in the alehouse isn't background noise, it's the night skeleton. Every laugh, every gulp, every whispered insult seems to land on the beat. The fiddler, a wiry man with a scruffy beard and a look that says he's slept in more barns than beds, starts to sing. His voice is rough, not unpleasant, the kind that knows what heartbreak tastes like but still enjoys the flavor. He launches into a song about a miller's daughter and a wandering knight. Predictably, it ends with someone getting caught in a haystack. The crowd roars with laughter, mugs banging on the tables like percussion. You can't help smiling. This is medieval entertainment. Part gossip, part music, part barely veiled moral lesson. The alewife calls out, "Sing it again, Tom, but skip the part with the bishop's niece." That earns another wave of laughter. You can tell they've all heard this song 100 times, but repetition is part of the fun. Each time, someone adds a new verse, or changes the ending, or pretends to forget the words just to make the room groan. That's the beauty of a medieval alehouse. Stories and songs are living things, always reshaped by the crowd. You can't quite tell where fact ends and imagination begins, but maybe that's the point. You sip your ale and let the sound vibrate through your bones. The rhythm changes faster now, and people start clapping in time. The floorboards shake under your boots. A man with a drum joins in, pounding unstretched hide with open palms. Someone finds a set of small bells, and suddenly the room transforms into a small, rowdy orchestra. One woman stands and starts dancing, not gracefully, but joyfully, arms waving, hair undone. Her skirts swish dangerously close to the fire. "Careful, Maud," someone shouts, but she doesn't stop. The fiddler grins and plays faster, his fingers blurring. You can't tell who's leading whom anymore, the dancer or the tune. Then he shifts into something softer. The laughter fades as if the air itself exhales. The new song is old, older than the beams above your head. It's a ballad about a ship lost to sea, the kind of melody that feels like it's missing someone. The fiddler's eyes are half closed now, his bow gliding slow and sure. You notice how even the drunks quiet down? This isn't just music, it's a memory, shared and rebuilt every time it's sung. A few voices join him, softly, uncertainly. For a moment, the alehouse sounds like prayer. Historians still argue whether such performances were spontaneous or planned. Whether musicians like this were hired or just wandered in for a free drink. Whatever the truth, you can feel that this man belongs here tonight. He knows their names, their stories, their sorrows. He plays not to impress, but to remind them that they're still alive, still connected, even after days of mud and labor. You glance around. The carpenter who was shouting earlier now stares into his mug, mouthing the words. The alewife's hand rests on the counter, still for once. Even the cat has stopped prowling. Then, just as quickly, the spell breaks. Someone shouts, "Play something happy, you'll drown us all." The fiddler grins, nods, and shifts into a reel so fast your head spins. The room erupts again, clapping, stamping, shouting. Someone bumps your arm and spills a bit of ale, but no one cares. The music here serves a purpose. It keeps the night from collapsing into silence. Medieval life was full of noise, hammers, roosters, sermons. But night was different. Darkness carried loneliness, fear, memories better left unremembered. Music filled that void. It told you that you weren't alone. As the tempo climbs, the fiddler tosses in a joke between verses. A friar, a fish, and a fool walk into a tavern, and only one leaves sober. The crowd howls. He winks at you. You suspect that's his first joke of the night, not his last. There's your first light joke, but you're not done. Another man, red-faced and missing a few teeth, stands and shouts that he can sing better. The fiddler bows dramatically and hands him the floor. The man clears his throat, hiccups, then begins a song that sounds more like a dying goose. Everyone claps anyway. The alewife even throws him a piece of bread for the effort. She laughs. The man bows like a king. Someone in the corner starts around that medieval favorite, calandresponse. You don't even need to know the lyrics. The crowd teaches you. The brewer's wife has eyes of brown. The fiddler sings, and everyone answers. She waters the ale when the sun goes down. It's catchy, scandalous, and utterly infectious. And here's a fun historical fact. Alehouse songs were one of the few ways ordinary people pass news, jokes, and even political messages. Some verses hid protest and humor, mocking lords or taxes under layers of rhyme. One surviving 15th century ballad, for instance, complains that the king's men drink but never pay. You can bet that line earned a few nervous laughs. Then, mid-song, a man beside you starts telling the fiddler about a rumor that the new lord forbids dancing on Sundays. The fiddler stops just long enough to say, "Then we'll dance twice as hard on Mondays." The crowd cheers. You nearly spit out your drink. Quirky tidbit time. Some villages actually had alehouse fiddlers' guilds, informal groups that policed who could play where, sort of like medieval musical unions, except membership was enforced by drinking contests. It's said one fiddler in Yorkshire lost his license after falling asleep mid-tune. That story gets a knowing laugh from the alewife when you share it aloud. As the music continues, the fiddler begins weaving local gossip into his songs. He improvises verses about the reeve's bad haircut and the baker's lazy son. The crowd cackles. You realize these songs are both entertainment and social control. Mockery works better than law. Everyone learns who's behaved badly and who might deserve another round to make amends. The fire pops, sending a spray of sparks upward. The fiddler pauses just long enough to wipe his brow, then turns toward you. "You look like someone who knows a tune," he says with a grin. You shake your head, but it's too late. The crowd's already chanting for you to sing. You stand, mortified, and manage a weak, tuneless hum. Beautiful. The fiddler declares dramatically, cutting you off before you can embarrass yourself. Truly, the silence of angels. The crowd erupts. There's your second light joke of the section. And yes, you're part of it. The night rolls forward on the tide of music. Even arguments sound melodic now. Two friends quarrel about the words to a ballad. One swears it's a rose in her hair. The other insists it's a thorn in her. Side. They nearly come to blows until the fiddler switches to a dance rhythm and somehow, they're spinning in circles instead of punching each other. That's the thing about these alehouse musicians. They're part mediator, part storyteller, part jester. The songs bridge tension and remind everyone that laughter's easier than bleeding. At one point, a man asks the fiddler if he knows the widow's ale, a song banned by the local priest for being morally compromising. The fiddler smirks and pretends to play something innocent, but the lyrics slip in anyway. Everyone catches on, singing low, mischievous. It's rebellion disguised as rhyme. Historians still argue whether church authorities truly feared music's moral influence or simply hated not being able to control it. Whatever the case, tonight you can see why they tried. One fiddler with a bowstring could turn obedience into laughter, fear into courage, sin into song. Your third light joke sneaks in when someone complains the fiddler's been playing too long. "If I stop," he says, "you'll have to talk to your wives sooner." The room explodes again. Even the alewife chuckles, shaking her head. As the final tune fades, you realize the floor's sticky with spilled ale and the air's thick enough to chew. People clap the fiddler on the back, drop coins or bread crusts at his feet. Payment comes in whatever form you can spare. He pockets the offerings with a grateful nod. Then he raises his bow like a toast and says, "Tomorrow, I'll play for the Reeves dinner. Tonight, I play for souls that need no saving." That earns him his loudest applause yet. When he finally sits down, The alehouse exhales as one. You can hear the fire crackling again. A few quiet conversations starting up. Somewhere near the door, rain still taps against the shutters. The fiddler sips his ale and smiles to himself, humming softly. Maybe he's writing tomorrow's tune already. Another story waiting to be born from tonight's chaos. You lean back, the melody still ghosting in your ears. The alehouse is calm now, but it's a living calm, like the pause between heartbeats. The music may have ended, but it lingers in the rafters, in the breath of every drinker here. You can't help but think, if these songs could survive centuries, maybe they never really ended. Maybe somewhere in the hum of a late-night bar or the echo of a campfire, the fiddler's still playing, keeping the night alive, one verse at a time. The laughter has softened to a cozy murmur now. The fiddler's last note still hangs in the smoky air, and you can almost see it shimmer before melting into the steady hiss of the hearth. The alewife refills mugs in slow circles, her movements lazy and practiced. And you realize that this is when the night begins to change. The songs settle down, replaced by something older, something that's been whispered beside firelight since before parchment was cheap stories. A mason near the hearth clears his throat. "You all heard of the Monk of Weatherford, haven't you?" he asks, voice gravelly but eager. A few groans rise from the crowd. Apparently, they've heard it a dozen times. But he grins and begins anyway, because repetition in this place isn't a flaw, it's comfort. He tells of a monk who stole a goose from a lord's kitchen, got caught and convinced his captors that he was merely rescuing a soul in feathered form. The room breaks into laughter. You nearly choke on your drink. Someone mutters, "Sounds like our priest last Lent," and the laughter doubles. But the mason isn't done. He raises a finger, as if this were serious business now. "They say the ghost of that goose still haunts Weatherford, honking every time a sinner drinks on Sunday." A few gasps follow, mostly mocking, but one woman near the corner crosses herself anyway. You file that under quirky belief number 17 for the night. Historians still argue whether medieval people actually believed these ghost tales or told them mostly for fun. Probably both. You can feel it here. Half of them are laughing, half are half convinced. And all of them are looking toward the dark corners of the room just a little too often. The fiddler, now slouched beside his mug, joins in. "Aye, but what about the baker's ghost from Alderton, the one who cursed his own oven?" The room hums. That story's older, heavier. Someone lights another candle as though the tale itself has chilled the room. He begins in a whisper. A baker, proud of his loaves, sold bread at inflated prices during a famine. When the starving begged him for scraps, he refused, until one night his dough rose on its own and spoke his name. Greed, it said, is a hunger that never sleeps. The baker laughed, baked it anyway, and in the morning his oven was filled with nothing but stones. The room is dead quiet now, except for the creak of a stool and the hiss of the logs. Even the alewife pauses, listening. You can feel the story settling like mist. And they say, the fiddler concludes, his ghost still counts stones. Thinking they'll turn to bread. Someone murmurs, "Serves him right." The alewife nods grimly. Then, almost immediately, another voice pipes up. "But if you leave a crumb by your hearth on St. Martin's Eve, he'll bake you a loaf in return." A wave of murmured approval follows. Every ghost needs a loophole, it seems. You're fascinated, not just by the stories, but by the rhythm of them. No one reads here, but everyone remembers. The tales stick in the air, passed like mugs, reshaped 100 times. The storyteller pauses when the fire crackles. Times the punchline to the clink of a cup, stretches silences like a craftsman stretching leather. The carpenter beside you leans closer. "Want to hear a true one?" he whispers conspiratorially. You nod. "Last winter, a man near here found a rat floating in his ale cask, still drank it. Said it gave him courage. Next day, he tried to fight the Reeves goose and lost. He shakes his head. Moral: don't outdrink your luck. You can't stop laughing. There's your first light joke of the night. Or maybe the joke's on you for believing it. Then a new voice joins in. An old woman with a scarf tied under her chin. Her tone cuts through the laughter, steady as a church bell. "You lot tell foolish tales," she says. "But I'll tell you one that's true." Instantly, the room hushes again. Even the cat stops licking its paw. She speaks of the Green Huntsman, a spirit said to ride through the woods at dusk, hunting souls who wander from home. "He doesn't kill," she says, eyes glinting in the firelight. "He just takes your voice, leaves you whispering forever, trying to warn others." A man laughs nervously. "And who told you that, Granny?" She stares at him for a long moment. "My husband," she says quietly. The night before he stops speaking, the laughter dies faster than ale in summer. You shift in your seat. The fire pops again, and you swear the shadows move. The old woman smiles then, breaking the tension. But maybe he just ran out of things worth saying. The room exhales in laughter, the kind that covers a chill. There's your second light joke. Dark, but effective. The alewife steps in now, clearing her throat. My turn. You can hear the amusement in her voice, the confidence of someone who knows her audience. "There was once a monk," she begins, "who claimed he could turn wine into water, said it was the holiest miracle of all." She pauses for effect. "He got arrested for fraud. Turns out, everyone just thought his wine was that bad." The room bursts into hysterics. Historians still argue, she adds with a grin. Whether it was the first case of false advertising, you nearly spit your drink again. That's joke number 3, perfectly timed. But her tone shifts softer after the laughter fades. "Still," she says, "these stories, they keep us warm, don't they? Like the fire. Maybe not true, maybe not false. Just enough to remind us we're not alone." You watch her eyes, see the flicker of something older than humor, a memory maybe, or a loss. Everyone here has one. The night is full of them. Someone asks for a saint story, something respectable. They say, half mocking. The alewife shrugs. "All right, St. Dunstan then. You know the tale." Murmurs of yes and no ripple through the crowd. "He was a blacksmith monk," she says, "and one night the devil came to tempt him. So Dunstan grabbed him by the nose with red-hot tongs and made him promise never to enter a house with a horseshoe above the door." "Is that why you've got one over yours?" someone asks. She nods. "And it's not just for luck. It's to remind the devil that I have good aim." The laughter returns, rolling and loud. It's strange in this tiny room. Stories aren't separate from life. They are life. They teach, they warn, they amuse. And they blur every line between history and myth, between sinner and saint. You start to notice that every storyteller ends with a drink, a kind of toast to the tale itself. Maybe it's superstition, maybe it's punctuation. Either way, you follow suit, lifting your mug after each story. The ale tastes better for it, richer, as if it soaks up the words. Then someone, perhaps the same mason who started this all, suggests a truth game. Each person must tell one story true and one false, and the rest must guess which is which. The first man claims he once saw a fish fall from the sky during a rainstorm. Laughter erupts until the alewife points out that such things do happen. Frogs, fish, they get caught in storms, she says, proud of her random wisdom. Nature has humor. The next man swears he drank ale brewed with stolen holy water. "Best batch I ever had," he adds. Someone mutters, "No wonder it vanished fast." A woman near the window tells of a dream where she met her dead father, who told her to plant beans before the frost. She did, and they grew twice as tall as her neighbors. Coincidence? She asks. The old woman shakes her head. Luck listens if you whisper right. You realize this whole exchange is more than play. It's practice for remembering, exaggerating, surviving. The line between entertainment and oral record isn't clear. Maybe it never was. Historians still argue whether alehouses served as folk archives, preserving legends that the literate elite ignored. Sitting here, surrounded by voices that overlap and contradict and laugh, you feel like the answer is obvious. This is history, alive and in motion, loud, messy, and unfiltered. Outside, the rain deepens into a steady drumming. The sound blends with the crackle of fire and the low hum of conversation. The fiddler taps his bow against the table, keeping time with the rhythm of speech. The air smells of ale and ash and something else, something like memory itself. You lean back, your head warm, your mind floating somewhere between story and dream. You realize you could stay here forever, trading tales until dawn, living in that thin space between truth and invention. The mason starts another story, but you barely hear the words now. The firelight flickers against the ceiling, and every shadow seems to carry a different face, a different tale. You wonder how many of them are still being told somewhere, centuries later, in pubs that smell just the same. You finish your mug, feeling it settle like a small, glowing secret inside you. Maybe tomorrow you'll remember half these stories wrong. But that's all right. Maybe that's how they survive. The fire burns lower now, its glow softening from orange to a sleepy red. The air is thicker, heavier, the kind of warmth that makes your eyelids drift shut between laughs. The songs have faded into hums, the stories into murmurs. And yet, the alehouse isn't quiet. It's alive in another way now, full of whispers, glances, and the subtle dance of secrets. You can feel it in your bones. This is the scandal hour. You notice it begins without a cue. The alewife, who spent the night laughing at every joke, suddenly leans against the counter and tilts her head toward a man sitting alone near the back. "Heard the Reeves wife came here last market day," she says, casual but sharp. Every ear within 10 feet perks up like a hound catching scent. She left with 2 pitchers of ale and 1 missing husband. The laughter explodes, muffled only by mugs raised in half-hearted attempts to cover grins. "Heard she went looking for him," the blacksmith adds, "and found him under the brewer's daughter instead." A roar of laughter follows. Someone nearly spills their drink. You shake your head, both amused and slightly guilty for listening. You realize gossip is its own kind of performance here. These people live in a world with few letters, fewer books, and no tabloids, so the alehouse is where reputations are made, unmade, and reheated like old stew. And just like stew, the flavor depends on who's stirring. A young lad by the wall leans in to you. "You want a good one?" he whispers. You nod, already hooked. The miller's apprentice caught sneaking out of the widow's window last week, barefoot, in January. The room bursts again, half in laughter, half in disbelief. Historians still argue, someone says between gasps. Whether the widow or the apprentice suffered frostbite first, you laugh too. But as you look around, you start to see the undercurrent beneath the humor. These stories, ridiculous as they are, have power. The wrong rumor can travel faster than any cart, shape how someone's treated for months. The medieval world doesn't have privacy in the modern sense. Reputation is everything. It's your currency, your safety, your chance at marriage or trade. And so, as the night deepens, scandal becomes a kind of currency too. A whispered story can buy laughter, favor, even forgiveness. The alehouse is its market, and everyone here's a trader. The alewife knows this best. You watch her shift between tables, refilling mugs, but also, more importantly, listening. Every ear, every smirk, every detail gets stored away. The alewife was the social network before Facebook. You think? A little amused. But she's more than that. She's the town's informal historian, its confessor, its judge in an invisible court where no parchment records are kept. At one table, a man mutters about the Lord Steward taking more grain than owed. Another, 2 women whisper about a midwife accused of knowing too much. The words mingle with smoke until it's impossible to tell truth from talk. You probably won't survive this. You think with a grin, not because of swords or famine, but because one wrong word here could ruin you faster than any plague. A thin man with a crooked smile sits near the door, strumming a lute missing 2 strings. Here's a new ballad, he announces. The Tale of the Tanner's Wife. The crowd cheers. They already know it's scandalous. He begins to sing, voice low and teasing. The tanner's wife, she loved a priest. He prayed her sins away, at least. The room howls. You can't help but join. By the 3rd verse, the rhyme has gone completely off, but the audience doesn't care. They clap, stomp, shout suggestions for rhymes, adjusting his lyrics midline. Historians still argue, he jokes, whether the tanner or the priest had the holier hide. But amidst the laughter, something strikes you. This is how stories traveled. Scandal wasn't just entertainment. It was oral news. If a bard sang it, the tale could leap villages in a day. Medieval gossip had rhythm, rhyme, and a melody sticky enough to outlast reason. And sometimes, scandal hid truth. The alewife lowers her voice as she passes by you. You know, they say the tanner's wife story started from a real affair. Got twisted, of course. The priest got reassigned, and the tanner got rich. She smirks. Maybe sin pays after all. Another joke ripples through the room, only if you tithe first. Someone shouts, a story. A scandal. Give us something new. And sure enough, a traveling merchant rises, his cheeks flushed with ale and pride. All right, he says, I've got one from the next shire. He begins slowly, letting the tension rise. A nobleman's daughter fell for a stable hand. The usual tale, but when her father found out, he ordered the boy whipped and sent away. Groans. Except the boy came back, dressed as a pilgrim, claimed he'd been to Jerusalem. The crowd leans forward. The merchant grins. T hadn't. Of course. T just stole a seashell and a crosspin from a real pilgrim and made up stories about sand and saints. The lady swooned. The father forgave him, and they married. A pause. Then the real pilgrim arrived. The laughter that follows is thunderous. Someone claps the merchant's back. Someone else shouts, he should have brought a map. You nearly fall off your bench laughing. Historians still argue. The merchant adds slyly. Whether the seashell was blessed or just really convincing, but there's more than laughter here, a pulse of rebellion. Beneath these tales, you hear small acts of defiance. Peasants mocking lords, wives mocking priests, commoners bending rules. It's safe here to do it. The alehouse is a sanctuary of laughter where hierarchy loosens. You can insult your betters in rhyme, mock the church with a grin, even confess sins that sound like punchlines. A man near the hearth leans over to you. You know why people drink? He asks. It's not for the taste, it's so their tongues can breathe. He raises his mug, 2 free tongues. The room cheers, laughing and clinking. For a moment, you feel it, that strange electric equality. The miller, the mason, the widow, the servant, all shoulder to shoulder, bound by ale and stories. Outside, the Lord's hall is silent, stone and cold. In here, it's fire and noise and warmth. Maybe this is the truest democracy they ever knew. Then the door creaks open. A cold wind snakes in, carrying the scent of rain and something else, tension. A figure steps inside, cloaked, hood low. The laughter dips slightly, like a ripple in still water. Everyone watches. It's the reeve, the local enforcer. His eyes scan the room, and the talk grows quieter. Evening, he says, too politely. Heard there was singing? The bard nods nervously. Only good Christian songs, sir. The reeve smiles thinly. I'm sure. He orders a drink, then sits, but his presence changes the air. Conversations shrink to whispers. The alewife, though, remains calm. You want the strong ale or the watered one? She asks. Depends how brave you're feeling. A ripple of laughter follows, restoring the balance. The reeve grunts, strong. He drinks, and after a few gulps, his sternness softens. Before long, he's laughing at a joke about a priest and a pig, a risky one. The crowd roars. You realize the alehouse has a strange magic. It disarms even authority. Still, the gossip continues in smaller tones. You overhear a pair of women whispering about the Lord's daughter, rumored to have a secret child, raised by a nurse in the woods. Historians still argue. One says dryly, whether it's true or just wishful thinking. The fiddler begins to play again, slow and low, filling the spaces between murmurs. The notes wrap around you like smoke. You sip your ale and think about how every era has its scandals. Only the tools change. Theirs are spoken, sung, passed hand to hand. Yours are posted, shared, forgotten. But maybe not so different after all. You catch one last exchange before the music swells. The mason leans toward the alewife. If you were a saint, what would you be patron of? She laughs. Loose tongues and empty mugs. Sounds about right, he says. The alewife grins, topping off another mug. Careful what you say, I remember everything. And you believe her. The night grows older, stretching like warm tallow melting down a candle. The scandalous laughter has quieted into low conversation again, a hum of shared breath and flickering flame. Outside, the rain has stopped, and in the brief silence between raindrops and voices, you hear the drip from the eave steady, patient, as if counting time. The alehouse breathes with it. You've crossed some invisible threshold now, no longer a visitor, but part of the room's rhythm. You rest your elbows on the rough oak table. The surface is scarred by decades of spilled ale and dagger scratches, initials carved by bored drinkers. One reads, Will 1379. Another, PR owes me ale. It makes you grin. Every mark is a ghost handshake between the living and the dead. The alewife begins wiping mugs, humming something wordless but haunting. The melody hangs in the air, older than any of the songs you've heard tonight. That tune, you ask? Where's it from? She shrugs. My grandmother sang it, said it keeps bad spirits from the house. Then she smirks. Doesn't always work. Historians still argue whether such household charms came from pagan roots or simple habit, but in truth, the distinction probably didn't matter to people like her. For them, everything holy and unholy mingled at the edge of the firelight. The fiddler picks up the tune, drawing his bow lazily across the strings. The notes waver, tender and low. A few heads nod along. Someone murmurs a half-remembered lyric. It's about a plowman's wife waiting for him at harvest, the mason says. Or a ghost waiting for her man who drowned. Depends who's telling it. You realize that's the beauty of alehouse lore. Every song carries a dozen lives inside it, shifting with each voice. Tonight, you're part of that chain. As the tune fades, the carpenter starts to speak. I saw a thing once, he says. On the road from Ely, his voice is quiet, but something in it pulls the room's attention. A man in white, no shoes, no shadow, walks straight across the marsh. When I ran after him, he was gone. Too much ale, someone teases, but softly. The carpenter shakes his head. Maybe. But I followed his prints. They stopped halfway, like he stepped into air. No one laughs this time. The alewife crosses herself. That road's cursed, she mutters. They built it over a graveyard. They say you glance toward the dark window, wondering if the marsh still remembers that man. Historians still argue whether medieval travelers truly believed in white ghosts of the dead, or whether such stories masked more earthly fears, robbers, hunger, loneliness, the blend of awe and unease, the thin line between skepticism and belief. The mason breaks the tension with a grin. Well, if ghosts walk that road, I hope they pay the toll. Laughter returns, nervous but welcome. The alewife pours another round, her sleeves rolled to the elbow. "You ever notice," she says, "how all the best stories start with ale? You can't argue." She slides you another mug. The froth spills slightly, and you wipe it with your sleeve, realizing how natural the gesture feels now. A sudden clap of thunder outside makes everyone jump. The old woman with the scarf chuckles. "That's just St. Peter knocking the ashes from his pipe." You smile, trying not to laugh at the mental image. There's your first joke for the section. Simple but oddly comforting. The wind picks up, rattling the shutters. The cat darts under a bench. The alehouse door groans like it wants to open. The flickering candles stretch shadows long across the walls, and for a moment, the room feels suspended, caught between the warmth of the fire and the cold just beyond it. The fiddler sets his bow down. "Ever heard the tale of the Thunder Wife?" he asks. Heads shake, curiosity rekindled. "They say she was the wind's bride, chained to the earth for loving a mortal man. Every time a storm comes, she tries to break free, and when lightning hits a tree, that's her striking the locks." "Romantic," the alewife says dryly. "If you like your love stories with splinters." The room chuckles. Historians still argue whether storm myths were meant to scare or to explain. You think, but either way, they make bad weather sound almost poetic. The blacksmith, who's been quiet most of the night, finally speaks. "When I was a lad, I heard that thunder was the saints bowling." The alewife smirks. "Then they've got terrible aim. They keep hitting my roof." Second joke, clean and easy. Someone throws another log into the fire, and the sparks fly like tiny stars. You lean back, mesmerized. In the glow, you notice the soot stains on the ceiling, forming vague shapes, faces. Maybe, or tricks of the eye. You can't tell. Maybe everyone who's ever laughed here left a shadow behind. The conversation drifts now from superstition to memory. People begin telling small, personal tales, the kind not meant for books. One man recalls losing his son in the fields. Another remembers the winter of deep hunger when they boiled bark just to stay alive. No one mocks, no one interrupts. The alehouse, once rowdy, becomes a sanctuary. You realize that in a world this fragile, laughter and grief share the same chair. The same mug that toasts a scandal can also cradle remembrance. It's oddly beautiful, this overlap of sin and tenderness. The old woman with the scarf reaches into her pocket and pulls out a small, worn Tokena wooden charm shaped like a bird. "For my daughter," she says softly. "Lost her to fever years ago, but when I hold this, she feels close." The alewife nods slowly. "That's what alehouses are for, love, keeping the gone ones near." For a long moment, no one speaks. The fire crackles, and outside, the storm fades into silence. Then, gently, the fiddler begins another melody, slower. This time, almost like a prayer. The notes rise and fall, wrapping around you like smoke. You sip your drink and let your thoughts wander. Maybe this is the real heart of a medieval alehouse, not just the scandal or the laughter, but this quiet intimacy between strangers. Here, people can remember without ceremony, confess without judgment, dream without shame. The mason suddenly breaks the softness. "All right," he says. "Enough ghosts and tears. It's got something to make us laugh again." The carpenter raises his hand. "Got one?" There was once a monk who wanted to preach against gluttony, but couldn't stop eating pies. So he invented fasting rules that only applied when he was awake. The room laughs, some nearly choking. And did it work? The alewife asks. Historians still argue, the carpenter says with a grin, but he died happy and very, very full. Third joke delivered, neat and timely. The laughter feels like sunlight returning after rain. The fiddler even joins mid-chord with a cheerful trill, as if to seal the moment. You breathe in deeply, catching the sense of ale, wood smoke, and faint sweats, strangely comforting, human smells that tell you you're part of this world now, not just observing it. The alewife claps her hands once. "All right, folks, Last call soon. If you've got a confession or a song left, make it count. A few groans, a few grins. The bard tunes his lute again. Someone in the corner starts humming an old harvest song about lost tools and found kisses. It's playful, repetitive, and entirely infectious. Soon the room joins in, voices stumbling through the melody. You hum too, letting the simple rhythm carry you. The words make no sense by modern standards, but that doesn't matter. They're about the earth, the body, and the cycle of loss and plenty that governs all of them. Historians still argue whether peasants sang these songs as genuine joy or weary habit. Tonight, you can tell. It's both. They sing because life is hard, and because it's also beautiful in ways no sermon can capture. The old woman nods along, eyes closed. The alewife sways while stacking mugs. Even the Riefhof, asleep now, mumbles part of the refrain. When the song ends, the room bursts into applause, the small kind that comes from tired, contented hands. The alewife smiles, brushing a lock of hair from her forehead. You know, she says softly, when I was a girl, my mother said a happy night keeps sickness away. Is that true? Someone asks. Historians still argue. She replies with a wink. But I've had fewer fevers since I bought this place. The laughter that follows is soft and warm. You can feel it in your chest, like a hearth ember. The storm outside has stopped completely now, and through the window you see a sliver of moonlight breaking through the clouds. The alehouse breathes a collective sigh. The night is quieter, slower, yet somehow fuller. The scandal, the stories, the songs, they've all melted together into something timeless. And as you look around at these faces glowing in the firelight, you realize this mix of joy, superstition, sorrow, and Ale is what it meant to live in a medieval village. Not grand battles or kings, but nights like this, where the world feels small enough to hold in your palm and infinite enough to never truly leave. By now, the candles have burned down to stubs. The light they throw is softer, warmer, more forgiving, blurring faces into silhouettes and making the whole alehouse feel like a painting still half wet. You shift in your seat, realizing your legs are numb from hours of sitting, but the ale keeps you comfortably anchored. Around you, the crowd is smaller. A few farmers already stumbled home through the mud, and the bard has passed out against the wall, with his lute still clutched to his chest like a sleepy child. What remains are the late dwellers, the night souls, the people who don't rush sleep because they've learned that the best part of life often happens after the songs have stopped. The alewife is still awake, of course. She always is. She moves through the room with slow grace now, her voice a little huskier, her laughter quieter but warmer. You holding up? She asks as she tops your mug. Barely, you answer, and she chuckles. Good, means it's working. There's a strange peace to this hour. The loudest ones are asleep. The sober ones are reflective. And the alehouse itself has grown gentle. No longer a den of scandal or song, but something else. It feels like confession. A man you haven't spoken to before leans across the table. His hands are rough and scarred, the nails blackened with work. You ever wonder, he says slowly, what makes a man good? The question catches you off guard. You glance toward him. His eyes are bloodshot, but sincere. Not much time for being good, the alewife says from behind the bar. Better to be useful. The man nods, but his expression doesn't change. I was a soldier once. Saw good men die for bad reasons, and bad men get blessed for surviving. He takes a sip. Now, I just want to die honest. Silence settles for a moment. You can hear the faint drip of rain outside, the creak of the inn's beams. You realize you're hearing something rare. Not laughter, not boasting, but unvarnished truth. Maybe that's what this hour is for, when the ale strips away every layer but one. Historians still argue whether alehouses served as moral centers or moral hazards. Sitting here, you think they were both a mirror, showing each person exactly what they were too proud or too afraid to admit. The fiddler stirs in his corner and mutters something about the devil's thirst. The alewife rolls her eyes. "He's dreaming of better wine," she says, earning a ripple of laughter. That's your first light joke of the section, though it feels gentler now, softer. Like the laugh you share at a funeral, just to keep breathing. The conversation shifts to regrets, small ones first. A lost coin, a broken plow, a missed fare. Then, deeper things. "I never told my boy I was proud of him," says the mason. "Now he's gone to London. Thinks he's too fine for us now. He'll come back," the alewife says, pouring him a refill. They always do when their shoes wear thin. Then the carpenter adds, "I once lied in confession just to get out faster." The room laughs again, but he shrugs. "The priest looked more bored than I was. Figured I'd save us both the trouble." Someone quips. Historians still argue whether that counts as half a sin, and the laughter blooms again. Second joke, well placed, even amid the melancholy. You realize now how human all of this is, flawed, humorous, tender. The church may rule the soul, the manor may rule the land, but the alehouse rules the heart. It's here that life gets spoken aloud, unpolished, unholy, and utterly real. The reeve still awake but looser now, his belt undone, his authority softened, raises his mug. "You lot talk too serious. Let's have a riddle instead." "Fine," says the alewife. "But if no one gets it, you're buying the next round." The reeve grins. What runs faster in winter, but never leaves tracks? The room murmurs, tossing guesses like dice. Wind, smoke, your wife's temper. The alewife snorts. "Careful, reeve. Sounds like they know you." He laughs, shakes his head, and answers, "The river." Frozen or not, she never waits. The room hums with approval. Someone adds, "Like gossip then, or temptation, or ale you offer," and that gets the loudest laugh. There's your third joke, and the reeve salutes you with his mug. The fiddler wakes again, rubbing his eyes. "Someone say ale." "You've had enough," says the alewife. "I'm saving what's left for the living." He groans but grins, then plays something living. And with that, he starts a slow, wistful melody. Not for dancing now, but for remembering. The sound fills the small room, weaving through the air like smoke. You feel your chest tighten a little. The tune has that strange medieval quality, mournful but steady, equal parts prayer and lullaby. The mason hums along under his breath. The blacksmith taps one foot softly against the floorboards. The alewife's eyes go distant. You think she's somewhere years ago, maybe with someone she lost. You've heard the historians say that medieval people didn't separate the sacred from the ordinary, that they could pray over bread and joke about death in the same breath. Sitting here, you finally understand. The sacred isn't in the church tonight. It's in this cracked mug, this tired song. This circle of strangers who refuse to leave each other's company even though tomorrow means hard labor and cold fields. When the song ends, there's no applause. Just a kind of silence that feels like reverence. You find yourself whispering, "Beautiful," and the alewife nods once, eyes glimmering in the firelight. Then a sudden burst of mischief breaks the stillness. The old woman, the one with the scarf and the wooden bird, leans in and says, "All right, one last story before I lose my voice." The room perks up again. She tells of a knight who made a vow of silence until he could find a woman who loved him, not for his title, but for his scars. He traveled the country, helping strangers in secret, until finally a blind woman took him in during a storm. When she touched his face, the old woman says softly, she said, "I know this kindness." And he spoke again. Because love doesn't need titles, only proof. The alewife wipes at her eye with the back of her hand. Historians still argue, she murmurs, whether that's a romance or a miracle. You feel something ache in your chest, a warmth that's not just the ale. This isn't just bedtime talk anymore. It's the echo of people who, against all odds, found meaning in the small and the ordinary. The blacksmith sighs, I like that one better than the goose ghost. The old woman grins. Aye. But the goose ghost will still find you if you mock it. The room laughs again, and you join in, half to mask the lump in your throat. The candles flicker lower. The air smells of smoke and malt, heavy with fatigue. Someone snores. Someone murmurs a prayer. The alewife begins collecting the empties, her movements slow but sure. You can tell she's done this thousands of nights. You lean back, feeling the warmth spread through your limbs. Outside, the first light of dawn hasn't come yet, but the world feels like it's preparing that subtle shift when darkness begins to thin. The reeve stands, wobbling. You'll be closing soon then, he asks. Aye, says the alewife, but not before I drink one myself. She pours a small cup, raises it toward the fire, and says, to the living, to the gone, and to those who can't tell the difference anymore. Everyone lifts a mug. It's quiet, sincere. You drink, and it tastes like belonging. The fiddler plucks one last string, letting the note hang in the air. Play us out, will you? Someone asks. He smiles faintly. Already am, he says, and you realize he means the sound of the fire itself, crackling, steady, ancient. The alewife laughs softly. You poets are all trouble. Historians still argue, he says with a wink. Weather troubles, the best thing to leave behind. You smile into your mug, knowing he's right. The last candle sputters. The door rattles gently from a breeze, and the alehouse, once wild with scandal and laughter, now feels like a heart beating slow and steady, the kind you could fall asleep to. You close your eyes for a moment. Somewhere beyond the walls, a rooster calls, faint and uncertain. The night is almost over, but the warmth remains. You realize you don't want to leave, and maybe, in some small way, you won't. You keep your eyes half closed for a while, drifting in that half-dream where time slows down and everything sounds like a lullaby. The alehouse breathes around you, the faint crackle of the fire, the creak of settling wood, a murmur from someone muttering in their sleep. You'd almost think the place itself were alive, like a creature resting after a long night of feeding on laughter and secrets. Then, just as you begin to fade into stillness, someone speaks. It's a whisper, hoarse and low. You still awake? You open one eye. It's the carpenter, leaning forward, his elbows on the table. His face is half in shadow, half in the dim orange of the hearth. You nod. Barely. He grins. Good. That's when the best stories come out. When you're too tired to lie properly, he pours the last of his ale and leans in closer. You ever hear what happens when a priest breaks his vow in this village? You shake your head, expecting some drunken jest, but his tone doesn't have the usual playfulness. They say, he continues, the churchyard grass turns black under his window the night he sins. Only for one night. Then it grows green again, like nothing ever happened. But the earth remembers. You feel the hair on your arms rise. Across the room, someone stirs the reeve again, awake but pretending not to listen. The carpenter smirks. Oh, don't look at me like that. You know the tale? The reeve sighs. I've heard it. And I've seen the patch of grass, too, near the old rectory. Historians still argue whether it's true or just the damp soil killing the roots. The carpenter laughs softly. Historians, he says, as though the word itself were the punchline. They don't sit here at night. They don't see what we see. The alewife, who's been quietly stacking mugs near the bar, glances over. If the earth remembers sin, then this floor must be a saint by now. The room chuckles, your first light joke of this section. She smiles faintly, but doesn't look up. You notice she's cleaning slower now, lingering on each cup, maybe listening, maybe waiting. There's a strange shift in the room. It's quieter now, not the cozy hush of before, but something heavier, expectant. You sense that this hour belongs to confession, not in the priest's booth, but here. under the sway of ale and flickering firelight. The carpenter continues. Softer, my brother. He worked at the manor. One night, he found a small chest buried behind the stables. Inside were coins, French, some of them, and a small cross, gold, broken clean in two. He told the bailiff. The next morning, the chest was gone, and the bailiff never spoke to him again. That same week, my brother fell sick and never rose. They said it was the fever, but, he shrugs, the grass over his grave still won't grow. You don't know what to say. The alewife finally breaks the silence. You should stop telling tales like that. The night's too long for ghosts. But she doesn't sound angry, just tired. The fiddler, who's been pretending to sleep, opens one eye. Ghosts are half the business, though, he mumbles. No one drinks for the taste. They drink to talk to the ones who aren't here. That line hangs in the air for a moment. You feel it more than hear it. It's an odd truth. Every story tonight has been about the living trying to make sense of the gone. Maybe that's the whole point of this place, to keep memory warm. The alewife sets down her rag. All right, she says softly. If we're telling things best left untold, I'll add mine. She leans on the counter, her face catching the soft glow of the fire. Years ago, when I was young, too young, there was a boy who used to wait outside after closing. He said he loved me. Said he'd build me a house of oak and glass. But he had a wife already in another village. When I found out, I poured his ale down the drain and told him to go to confession. He did. Then he left. Never came back. A year later, I heard he'd drowned crossing the ford. She pauses. Every spring, when the river floods, a single mug floats down that same way. Always the same kind of mug we used then. I don't know if it's a trick of the current or something else. But I keep one on the shelf, just in case. The room stays silent. The only sound is the slow settling of the embers. The reeve clears his throat. Historians still argue, he says softly, whether what we call superstition was just a way of keeping our grief busy. You look at the alewife's face and see that he's right. Outside, the wind picks up, whistling faintly through the shutters. Someone murmurs a quick prayer under their breath. You don't catch the words, but you can tell it's one of those half-ancient, half-invented charms people mutter when they want to feel protected but don't want to look foolish. The sort of thing that makes no sense but feels right. You lean back again, trying to soak it all in. This isn't just drinking, it's therapy, medieval style. Liquid courage, shared sorrow, no judgment. A man at the far table, you think he's a cooper by trade, suddenly stands. You think you've all got stories. Hey, says, grinning crookedly. I've got one that'll make your bones crawl. The alewife sighs but lets him speak. He begins to tell of a black dog that visits only those who've stolen ale. It walks like a man, he says, on hind legs, and its eyes glow red. But if you confess before dawn, the dog forgives you, leaves you a coin under your cup. You raise an eyebrow. Convenient dog. He winks. Aye, it's the brewer's dog, trained by guilt. The room laughs, your second joke, perfectly timed to cut the tension. But then the reeve adds, half serious. I did once find a coin under a spilled tankard. Silver, not ours. Never did find out whose. The laughter dies down again. The line between jest and truth blurs completely. The fiddler tunes his instrument quietly, filling the silence with soft notes. You know, he says, people say scene's heavier when you keep it secret. But it's lighter after ale. Maybe God made drink so we'd speak. The alewife gives a weary smile. Historians still argue whether he approves of that theology. The room chuckles again, a faint ripple that fades quickly. You notice that everyone seems to have aged a little tonight. The lines under their eyes, the slow gestures, the way they sit hunched as if the weight of all those shared memories is pressing on their backs. But they also seem freer, lighter somehow, as if naming their ghosts has given them permission to live again. someone opens the door for air, and the night wind rushes in, cool, sharp, smelling of wet earth and smoke. The sudden gust snuffs out one of the candles, and in the flickering dimness, every face looks briefly otherworldly. For a moment, you could almost believe the dead are sitting among the living, listening in silence. You glance at the alewife. She doesn't seem surprised. "They always come back for the stories," she says quietly. The carpenter nods. "Or maybe we call them back." There's that third and final joke waiting to land, and it comes from the fiddler again. "If any ghosts hear from my playing, I hope they pay their tab." The room bursts into laughter, and the spell breaks. But even as you laugh, part of you feels the chill of what came before. The medieval alehouse wasn't just about drink and pleasure. It was the village's heart, pulsing with sin and sorrow, binding people through shared confession. In a time before diaries, before psychologists, before privacy itself. This was how you unburdened your soul. Over ale, among strangers who pretended not to remember come morning. The alewife moves through the tables, dousing the last of the candles. "Enough talk," she says softly. "You'll scare the dawn away." You drain your cup, though you're not sure what's in it anymore. Ale, maybe. Or something deeper, older, like the collective sigh of everyone who's ever sat in this place and whispered their story into the night. As the fire dwindles, you catch sight of something faintly glowing near the hearth. Just a glint, perhaps from a coin someone dropped earlier. But part of you wonders, maybe the black dog's been generous tonight? You don't tell anyone. Some secrets are better left inside the story. The night is nearly spent. What remains of the fire looks like a dragon's dying breath. Faint red coals pulsing beneath a layer of gray ash. The air is thick with the scent of smoke, spilled ale, and the faint temps of damp wool. Most of the regulars have dozed off where they sit, their heads pillowed on folded arms. The rhythm of their breathing blending with the whisper of the wind outside. But the alehouse isn't done with you yet. It never is. Not until the first light slices through the cracks in the shutters. That's when consequences arrive, silent, sober, and often too late. The alewife is the first to break the stillness. She stretches, yawns, and begins gathering the empty mugs, moving with that same mixture of exhaustion and grace that only comes from years of repetition. You can hear her hum softly, a tune you recognize from earlier, the one the fiddler played, only slower now, like she's coaxing the night toward its end. The reeve, who's been slumped near the fire, suddenly stirs. His eyes are glassy, but his mind has sharpened again, as if the creeping cold has sobered him more effectively than water ever could. "You'll all be needing to stand before the warden tomorrow," he mutters, half to himself. The alewife raises an eyebrow. "For what, this time?" He sighs. You know how it goes. A man stumbles home, finds his wife waiting with a rolling pin, claims he was bewitched by strong ale. Next thing, the parish clerk writes up a complaint. The bailiff wants fines. The church wants penance. Everyone wants to look holier than the rest. You smirk. Sounds familiar. The reeve gives a humorless laugh. Aye, but this time, there's talk of that fight last week. The one with the miller. The room shifts. Even the sleepers seem to tense. You remember hearing about it? A small scuffle that started over a card game and ended with someone's nose broken and a table overturned. The alewife frowns. That was settled. They shook hands. The reeve shakes his head slowly. Not to the steward. There's talk the miller's cousin made complaint. Claimed the alehouse encourages disorder. Encourages life, she says firmly. He looks at her, weary. Life's what they fine us for these days. There's your first wry joke of the section, though it lands with a sigh instead of laughter. You sit back, watching the exchange. This, you realize, is the hidden side of all the laughter and song, the reckoning. Medieval justice doesn't forget. What happens in the alehouse may stay whispered, but someone always hears enough to twist it into evidence. The reeve continues. You should close early tomorrow. The steward's clerk is coming from the manor. He finds any dice on the tables, he'll seize them. Dice, says the fiddler, stirring awake from his corner. They'd take my music too, if they could measure sin by rhythm. The alewife chuckles. Historians still argue whether rhythm's a gateway to the devil or to happiness. That earns a tired laugh from the room. The second light joke, small but needed. You sip what remains of your ale, though it's gone flat and bitter. The taste feels symbolic, the sweetness of the night turning to the sour of morning. Outside, faint sounds stir, a rooster calling, a dog barking somewhere far off. The first hints of dawn crawl through the cracks in the shutters. And with them comes a different kind of energy, the nervous, restless pulse of guilt. The carpenter rubs his face, groaning. If I'm fined again, my wife will send me to the friary to scrub floors. Wouldn't hurt you, the alewife teases. She says that every time, he mutters. And every time, she forgets once I bring home her favorite bread. The reeve snorts. Historians still argue whether forgiveness or hunger rules the home. That's the third joke. And this time, it lands better. Laughter returns, a little weary, but genuine. You can feel the mood lighten slightly. The alewife pours one final round, a kind of truce offering before the day begins. If they want to find me, she says, they can come drink first. I've yet to meet a man who condemns what he enjoys. The reeve eyes her. Careful, that sounds like heresy. She shrugs. Only if you're sober enough to notice. The laughter that follows feels like an exhale, the release before the end. But just as the laughter fades, a knock sounds at the door. Not loud, not urgent, but unmistakable. Everyone freezes. The alewife frowns. At this hour, the reeve rises, swaying slightly. Stay here, he mutters, moving toward the door. The floorboards creak under his boots. He opens it just enough to see who's outside. A gust of cold dawn air slips in, along with the scent of wet grass. A voice murmurs something too low for you to catch. The reeve sighs. Of course, always early, never pleasant. He turns back. It's the clerk, wants to inspect the books. The alewife's eyes narrow. At dawn, he shrugs. He's eager to find fault, that one. She straightens her apron, wipes her hands, and walks toward the back. Let him in. But if he touches my cask, he'll be leaving without fingers. You try not to laugh. It's both threat and truth, and somehow that makes it comforting. The clerk enters, thin, pale, dressed like someone allergic to warmth. He glances around the dim room, wrinkling his nose. Still open. Closing, says the alewife. He sniffs. I can smell sin from the lane. You lean toward the carpenter. Must be his cologne. The carpenter chokes on a laugh, earning a glare from the clerk. Your name? The clerk says to the alewife, opening a small ledger. She gives it. Any gambling tonight? Only over Hood clean the tables. Any fights? Only between me and the broom. He frowns, scribbling something. You mock the law. No, she says sweetly. Just your questions. The reeve suppresses a grin. You can tell he's trying not to choose sides, but his silence speaks volumes. The clerk finishes his notes, then says, the steward will review this. Expect a summons within the week. The alewife tilts her head. Tell him to bring an appetite. I'll serve him the truth warm. He glares, snaps the ledger shut, and leaves without another word. When the door closes, everyone exhales at once. The fiddler shakes his head. He's the sort who'd outlaw laughter if he could. The alewife smiles tiredly. They already tried that once. Didn't last. And that's the thing about this place. The alehouse always survives. Rules come, rules go. But people always need somewhere to feel human. You remember what the reeve said earlier about fines, about punishment. and realize something simple but profound. The alehouse isn't rebellion, it's resilience. Still, the tension lingers. The reeve sits down again, rubbing his temples. They'll find some reason, you know. They always do. The parish needs money. The steward needs control. The bishop needs a scapegoat. The alewife looks at him steadily. Then let them take me. But not this place. This is ours. You can tell she means it. Every word carries the weight of years. She's seen drunks, scandals, raids, even the plague pass through her door. But somehow, the alehouse endures. It's stitched into the fabric of village life like thread in an old cloak, frayed but still holding. The fiddler lifts his lute again, plucking a slow, hopeful tune. The sound fills the air like a benediction, washing over everyone, even the clerk's fading footsteps outside. The reeve chuckles softly. You play like a man who doesn't know the day's coming. The fiddler smiles. Maybe I don't. Maybe I play so it stays night a bit longer. Historians still argue whether music was rebellion or prayer in medieval alehouses, whether it soothed the soul or tempted it. Listening now, you decide it's both. The tune fades. The alewife opens the shutters, letting in the gray light of dawn. Dust motes dance in the beam like tiny spirits. You blink against the sudden brightness, feeling the sting of morning and the ache of memory. The reeve stands, groaning. Well, we'll see what the steward says. I'll tell him this. If he closes this place, he'll have to host half the village in his own hall. Then he'll finally learn what real work feels like, the alewife says, smiling. Everyone laughs again, one last time before they rise from their seats. Mugs are set down, chairs scraped back, farewells murmured. You stand too, stretching stiff legs. The world outside waits cool, damp, and honest in the way only morning can be. You look around once more. The alehouse, emptied now, feels smaller, humbler, just wood and smoke and silence. But you know that tonight, when darkness falls again, the same laughter, songs, and scandals will return. Nothing ends here, not really. It just pauses between drinks. The dawn creeps fully into the alehouse, spilling pale light across the worn floorboards. You squint against the brightness, noticing for the first time the detail of the room that seemed to hide in shadows last night. Every scar in the wood, every blackened ceiling beam, every uneven stone of the hearth holds a memory and perhaps a story that's been repeated so many times it has become legend. You trudge over to the counter where the alewife is wiping down the final mugs, the rhythmic motion of her rag hypnotic in the soft morning light. Morning, you murmur. She looks up, eyes tired but sharp. Morning. Not much time left before the village stirs. You nod, understanding that this is the liminal space, that hour between night and day, where the alehouse breathes its last sigh of intimacy before the outside world intrudes again. It's a quiet that carries the weight of yesterday's laughter and yesterday's secrets. A pause that feels like holding a breath just before plunging into cold water. The air smells of wood smoke, spilled ale, and the faint, lingering sweetness of yesterday's bread. It's grounding, comforting, and yet tinged with melancholy. This scent carries everything that happened in the alehouse, the songs, the gossip, the minor betrayals, and the tiny triumphs of shared human experience. Historians still argue whether the smell of alehouses helped people bond or merely masked the stench of poor sanitation. But you can feel how it binds everyone together tonight, like an invisible thread. The alewife begins arranging mugs on a shelf, and, in the quiet, you hear the soft creak of the door as the first villagers of the morning trickle in, a baker with flour on his hands, a young boy delivering milk, the shepherd who tends the village outskirts. Their presence is casual, routine, yet it disturbs the fragile cocoon the night left behind. You recognize the subtle tension. The alehouse belongs to the night, and they are the day intruding. The carpenter stretches, cracking his knuckles. "Night's over," he mutters, though his voice carries no bitterness, only the realization that life demands its return. The mason wipes his brow, grimacing against the light. You remember the stories of last night, the ghostly figures, the black dog? The whispered confessions, and you wonder which of them will survive the scrutiny of daylight. A faint breeze slips through the open window, rustling the corners of the room and bringing with it the sharp temps of wet earth. Outside, the village is waking, roosters crowing, horses stamping, carts creaking. The day promises work, chores, minor conflicts, and maybe even a fight or two over spilled ale or insulted honor. Yet here, inside the alehouse, there's a moment of suspended time, a fragile pocket where yesterday lingers, refusing to leave. The fiddler, leaning against a corner wall, lifts his instrument and plucks a single note, soft, fragile, almost apologetic. It echoes across the room, and you realize it's a bridge, a final thread connecting the night's intimacy with the approaching day. He's not playing a song meant for dancing or drinking now, but for remembering. Every note reminds you of laughter and sorrow, of whispers of the dead and the living, and of the fragile human need to share experience to make sense of life together. You walk across the room, careful not to step on a chair or spill a drop of ale that survived the night. Your steps disturb a layer of dust that wasn't noticeable before, and the particles rise like tiny phantoms, glittering in the morning light. You pause and look around, seeing faces in the shadows of furniture, recalling the murmured voices, the heated arguments, the sly jokes that punctuated the night. You remember the black dog story, the storm wife, the drowned brother, the monk's gluttony, fragments of life, memory, and folklore stitched into a tapestry of living, breathing human experience. The alewife catches your gaze and nods faintly, as if she knows the weight of all that memory. She moves with purpose now, finishing her chores, sweeping the last corner of the floor with a broom that has witnessed decades of human folly. Historians still argue, she says softly, whether a place like this is more about community or indulgence. I say it's both, and if you think too hard, you'll miss the point. You smile, recognizing the truth in that. The alehouse has been every emotion and all contradictions wrapped in one room. A young boy enters to fetch water from the cask. His eyes widen at the sight of the flickering embers and scattered mugs, and he hesitates. The alewife smiles at him. Quiet now, little one. The night left some stories behind, but they're ours to keep for a bit longer. You notice that even the furniture seems to sag with the memory of the night, each chair, table, and beam holding a residue of laughter, argument, and whispered confession. You touch the surface of the counter and feel the rough grain of the wood. It carries warmth, but also a strange imprint of every hand that has rested there. You wonder how many secrets it has absorbed, how many lives it has silently witnessed. The mason sits at a corner table, his hands folded. It's funny, he says, almost to himself, how a place like this can be dangerous, scandalous, and yet somehow safer than anywhere else in the village. He glances around. We can be honest here. No one judges. Not really. The carpenter chuckles. Even the ghosts don't judge. Just listen. You lean back, letting the final fragments of night sink into you. The fire is nothing more than glowing embers now, and yet you can feel the warmth lingering in your bones. The alehouse, with all its scandal, song, and whispered confessions, has offered you a glimpse into what it meant to be human in a world where life was unpredictable, harsh, and fleeting. The alewife finishes stacking the last mugs and sets the broom against the wall. She exhales deeply, her breath mingling with the faint smoke that still lingers. Well, she says softly, another night survived, and another day begins. The villagers start trickling out into the streets, their morning routines calling them away. You follow the movement with your eyes, noting how the daylight transforms everything, how shadows shrink, how details sharpen, how the alehouse, which felt timeless, begins to look ordinary again. Yet, in your heart, you know that tonight's echoes will linger, like the faint scent of smoke that refuses to dissipate. You step outside for the first time since arriving. The air is cool, crisp, and carries the faint scent of wet earth and the promise of labor. You take a deep breath, feeling the contrast between the freedom of the open day and the intimate confinement of the alehouse. There's a strange satisfaction in knowing that both exist and that the alehouse, with its songs, stories, and scandals, will always be waiting for night to return. The fiddler follows, carrying his instrument under one arm, humming softly. "Night's never really over," he says. "Not for those who remember." You nod, understanding perfectly. The stories, the laughter, the whispered confessions, and even the ghosts, whether real or imagined, are all part of a living tradition that binds people together, one alehouse at a time. You glance back at the door as the sun rises higher. The room inside is quiet now, almost serene, but in that quiet, it still hums with life. The warmth of memory, the shadow of yesterday, the promise of tomorrow, all converge in this small, crooked building that has seen more humanity in one night than most places see in a lifetime. You take one last look, savoring the echo of laughter, the memory of scandal, the melody of songs still hanging in the air. The alehouse has shared its secrets with you. You feel the weight of the stories, the joy of the shared human experience, and the comfort of knowing that such places existed and still exist in some form. As you walk down the cobbled street, the village awakening around you, you carry with you the warmth of the night, the scent of ale and smoke, and the knowledge that a medieval alehouse is more than a place to drink. It is a vessel for memory, for humanity, for connection across time and space. And in that moment, you realize that although the night has ended, its spirit endures in stories told, songs sung, and in every human heart that remembers the laughter, the scandal, and the quiet magic of a place that truly understands life in all its messy, intoxicating beauty.